This is my daily, a Mazda MX-5. It's had some neglect recently, with me spending most of my time fixing other projects, such as the Celica. Part 2 will come out for that very soon, I promise. So this currently is my daily car. I've got a few things I need to fix on it. Firstly being the rear brakes. I've had the wheels off and had a look at the rear brakes. It seemed like some of the slider pins were seized. I tried to give it a bleed as well and I snapped one of the bleed nipples, so I'm just replacing the rear calipers, brakes, pads, etc. And then I'm going to give the car another bleed. To start this fix, I first chocked up my front wheels. With this car being rear wheel drive, there's no way of stopping the front wheels from moving when the car is parked, meaning if you try to jack up the rear, the car is going to roll. I then started to raise the car. On the MX-5, if you want to safely lift the rear axle, you must place your jack under the differential housing. You should probably use a bit of wood to prevent it from being scratched up, but my jack has a rubber pad on it. Once it was in the air, I placed two axle stands under the control arms. You're meant to put them under the jacking points. With this being Jap scrap, I don't trust them at all. I then lower the car's weight onto these stands and keep the jack in position just in case the axle stands fail. Next, I took off the wheels, trying to ignore the chrome socket. I first undo this clip with the wheel speed sensor cable. I then undo the banjo bolt which supplies brake fluid to the caliper. In hindsight, I probably should have kinked this flexi line as it got quite messy with brake fluid. I removed the two bolts holding the brake carrier on, and off comes the caliper. I then removed the brake disc, giving the wheel hub a good scrub with a wire brush and a good coating of copper grease. Now the disc wasn't too bad in my opinion, it only had a bit of a rust lip to it. I gave the disc a good sanding with 120 grit sandpaper. This resurfaces the disc, getting rid of that lip and any glazing, which allows the new brake pad to properly bed in. Finishing this up, I gave it a spray with some brake cleaner and a wipe down with a rag. I then put it back onto the wheel hub. You can see here where I scratched up the surface with the sandpaper. You're aiming for sort of a crisscross pattern. I then put two wheel nuts back on so it held the disc in place, flat against the wheel hub. I next started to separate the caliper from the carrier. I first removed all the slider pins, however the other slider pin was properly seized inside of its housing. This was definitely my issue. I took the carrier home and got some help from my dad to remove this stuck broken bolt. My dad first put the carrier into a vise to hold it in place. We then cut a line in the centre of the snap bolt and he gave it a good whack with a hammer and chisel. This didn't work and the bolt wasn't budging. He then placed a nut onto it and tried welding it to the bolt. This didn't work either. I stopped being a cheap bugger and just ordered a new carrier. Several days later, they finally arrived. I first started off by resurfacing the disc again. Just look at the difference when I reinstalled it. As this was a second-hand part, I wire brushed the new carrier to remove the surface rust from where the shims and pad will sit. I then installed the new carrier, torquing the bolts to 50 Newton meters, as per what the Haynes manual suggests. I then installed the upper slide pin. This was the pin that was seized in my caliper before. Looking on forums, it seems very common for these cars, especially when people just do a pad slap and don't re-grease the slide pins. Next I applied a bit of grease to the slide pin and slid the new caliper over it, making sure to wipe up any excess grease. After that, I tilted the caliper upwards and held it in place with a screwdriver. I then applied a little grease to the brake pad contact points and installed the new shims and pads. I applied a little grease to the back of the pads and lowered the caliper. I then installed the second slider pin, torquing it down to 50 Newton meters once again. I next installed the brake line to the caliper. I replaced both copper washers and torqued the banjo bolt to 22 Newton meters. Most people don't torque these. The issue is arm and oath. If I don't do this properly, I'll probably just end up snapping a bolt and having to order a new caliper. I then reinstalled the handbrake cable and repeated the same on the other side. On older models of this MX-5, you have to adjust the rear brakes with an alignment screw on the back of the caliper. You tighten this screw until the pads contact the disc and then back it off by about a third of a turn. Did this on both sides and then began the bleeding procedure. To bleed these brakes on the MX-5, I first opened up the reservoir and topped it up with .4 brake fluid. I've then got a special bleed nipple spanner with a one-way valve inside of it. This allows air and fluid to exit the brake system and not let air back in. This is perfect for bleeding brake solo. I then attached a silicone tube onto my spanner. This will direct the brake fluid into the white container. Starting with the furthest caliper from the reservoir, I cracked open the bleed screw with my special spanner and then kept pumping the brake pedal, topping up the reservoir with new fluid every 5 or 6 pumps until no more air could be seen within the silicone hose. I then tightened the bleed screw and repeated the same on the other side. Once the brakes were fully bled, I adjusted the rear caliper once again and installed the wheels. With the wheels on, I double checked that the wheels could spin freely with little resistance when the handbrake isn't applied. I then tried the same test with the handbrake applied to see if the wheels wouldn't spin. Success. I then lowered the cart and torqued the wheel nuts to 100 Nm. Then I had a bit of a read of the manual that came with the brake pads, as they usually have a bed-in procedure, but I couldn't see one, so I took it out for a test drive. See here, the brakes work perfectly, and it isn't pulling to one side under braking. They feel so much better than they did before. Thank you for watching this video to the end. The next Celica video is still in progress. Things aren't going so well with the project at the moment. I've tried upping the editing quality of this video a little bit. I'm open to criticism. Please let me know how I can improve and what content you'd like to see next. If you subscribe, that would be massively appreciated too. Bye.